Hello, everybody, and thank you for taking the time to join this security bootcamp session where we're going to talk about the future of network security and how SASE can help solve some of your top security use cases. My name is Kiran Gudgaonkar. I'm the Director of Product Marketing here at Citrix for our application and delivery portfolio. And today, I'm going to take you through a short presentation where you're going to be able to learn a little bit about what's happening in the SASE market and how you should be planning ahead to deploy a SASE architecture as you go through the future of the hybrid workforce. Please take this opportunity to ask questions throughout the session through the Q&A chat window where we have experts on hand that will be able to answer your questions. So let's talk a little bit about the landscape and why SASE is important today. So as we start to exit the pandemic, employees are thinking about returning to work and businesses are thinking about how they can accommodate their employees in this new future of work. Some of the common things that we're starting to think about are who will be returning to work, who will be continuing to remain mobile, and who will continue to move into more of a hybrid environment. So we need to think more about moving from this fully remote workforce to a hybrid workforce. The other two trends that are going to be important are around the movement to cloud and the consumption of SaaS. This has been a trend that has been going on for some time and has accelerated under the pandemic. And then lastly, we now need to think about the role of security in securing that hybrid workforce. As our workers are going to become more distributed and the applications they are consuming are more distributed as well, how do businesses and organizations provide a secure environment that allows your workers to get work done? Now, one thing to keep in mind is that it's still early days and it's also unpredictable. Are all your employees going to be coming back to the office? What days are they going to be coming back to the office? And how much of your workforce is going to remain remote? So a lot of these questions are yet to be answered. And so IT organizations really need to take a step back and think about how do they need to rethink their approach to security as they think about the future of work. But one thing's for certain, existing legacy hardware-based hub and spoke architectures are not going to be sufficient to support the hybrid workforce. Ultimately, it's going to slow businesses down. It's going to impact the employee by impacting the employee experience. And when that happens, productivity is reduced, which ultimately impacts the business results. So before we get into SASE, one thing we need to think about is the application landscape. Ultimately, work and businesses are built on applications, and that is becoming increasingly complicated. Not all applications are the same, and the way we consume them is not the same either. So it's good to take a step back and think about, okay, what is the application landscape today before we get into how we want to secure it. Now, I think I took a stab at really trying to break down the four key areas which I believe are the application landscape. Number one is web-based traffic, something that we all consume personally and both professionally, either through a browser or video traffic or social media traffic. We want the flexibility to use all of them, whether it be for personal use or for professional use. The movement to SaaS has been ongoing. Common applications like Microsoft 365, Dropbox, Salesforce.com, and even our very own Citrix Digital Workspace products. Those are all examples of SaaS applications. And then keep in mind that there's still a lot of legacy applications out there. Legacy proprietary applications that are not necessarily designed or built for cloud, and for the most part will need to remain on-premise in your local data center. And then lastly, there's the platform as a service and infrastructure as a service clouds. Used differently, in some cases, they could be used to host your virtual applications and desktops. They could be used to host databases. And then let's not forget those best of breed applications where developers are leveraging databases from Oracle, analytics from Google, storage from AWS. So those are best of breed applications. So the application landscape is actually pretty complicated, but it's very, very important that we do a level set and understand what are the applications that we are going to need to support moving forward. And that ultimately can provide a baseline for how we want to approach our security strategy. So what is SASE? It's a term that cropped up about 18 months ago and is becoming commonly used in the industry today. And ultimately, what it stands for is Secure Access Service Edge. And it's really a combination of two technologies coming together. Number one is security, cloud access security brokers, secure web gateways, data leakage prevention, all sort of coming together into a single security architecture delivered from the cloud. SASE also includes networking, where your users are typically accessing your applications from, right? A branch location would typically have some type of on-premise security device like a firewall or intrusion detection and prevention system. But also, as applications have moved to the cloud, then organizations have struggled with providing the right user experience, either through lack of bandwidth or the inability to provide direct internet access at the remote location. So SD-WAN has really come in to fill that void. And so that's great, but the more and more locations that you have, the more complicated it becomes managing all of these locations, all the connectivity that comes with it, and all of the security capabilities that come with it too. So that's seen the move to cloud-based security, and that's why we've seen organizations start to think about moving security from on-premise into the cloud. And so when you bring both of these two technologies together, the convergence is inevitable because the complexity is becoming overwhelming for IT. And just through lack of expertise or lack of manpower, organizations are looking for more of a cloud-based solution that can ultimately provide a secure and reliable experience for work from home users. And this will ultimately protect all users and devices from SaaS and web threats. And this, most importantly, this model can really help businesses to grow their security services as their businesses grow. You know, one of the common use cases I often hear about is around mergers and acquisitions and being able to bring new organizations into an existing organization and provide a unified security and application delivery experience. So that's what SASE is. Now let's talk about what is the Citrix approach. So Citrix approach is really to bring together a number of technologies into one. And I want to highlight the fact that SASE is not necessarily a product or a solution, it's an architecture. And you know, that architecture is built up of multiple different components. And as we can see, the Citrix approach starts with our underlying SD-WAN solution, which has been in the market for some time. We have a mature SD-WAN solution that provides all of those WAN optimization, fast paths into the cloud providers, and high reliability and resilience capabilities to provide that good user experience. We have Citrix Analytics Service, which is basically available to provide end user identity and behavior analytics. And then we have secure workspace access, which is our zero trust capability, which provides also remote browser isolation capabilities as well. And then lastly, a secure internet access product, which provides a full comprehensive stack delivered from the cloud across 100+ POPs of security to bring security closer to those users wherever they may be located. And then to bring all of the pieces together, we have a unified management solution through our Citrix Cloud, which makes it easy to access all of these services and manage them. And over time, we'll be bringing all of these services closer together and really integrating them, making it easier for IT to provide a unified, secure, reliable access to all applications anywhere on any device. Now, when that happens, ultimately, that unified management automation can really help your team focus. Because when your IT team is busy, they aren't focused on high priority items. And SASE is one way that organizations are rethinking their security architecture to really reduce that operational spend that they are that is increasing today due to complexity of security and networking being siloed today. Now, as I mentioned, these are all separate products and they can be purchased standalone. It really depends on where you want to start your SASE journey and where you want to go. And that's why it's very, very important to understand how you want to use your security today. And that can really help you on your prioritizing and then starting your journey towards SASE. Okay, so let's take a quick look at how this all comes together, right? So on the left, you can see your users and devices, and on the right, you can see your applications hosted in the cloud. And really, I see it as three phases, which is being able to authenticate through single sign-on. And if you are a Citrix Workspace user today, our digital workspace solution, then you're ultimately going to be able to single sign on to all of your internal and SaaS applications very easily. And once you're authenticated, you need to be able to connect. Now, one thing that we've seen organizations struggle with is the ability to scale existing VPN solutions, as well as deal with the fact that employees want to be able to connect directly to the cloud services that they need. Doesn't really make sense for them to VPN back into the corporate environment and then go out to the internet. So VPN-less has become a big focus area for organizations. And that ultimately is able to provide a little bit more scalability and also provide organizations VPN-less access to those internal legacy applications sitting in the data center, regardless of where the user is located. And lastly, once the user is connected and authenticated, the Citrix Analytics service will continue to monitor that end user behavior and provide IT with a vulnerability score or a risk assessment score that enables them to determine, is this user really going to be exposed to more threats and vulnerabilities, and whether or not they need to take action to control that user's access to the network, or even whether or not the user may already be infected. And then once everybody's connected, authenticated, we're monitoring our endpoints. We need to continuously monitor what traffic users are accessing. And that's where secure or cloud-delivered security, secure internet access can really provide another layer of security, provide that ongoing protection as users go through their day accessing the applications that they need to get their work done. And then together, all users and devices are protected wherever they are, regardless of the device that they're using. So let's take a look at some of these use cases for each one of those areas one time in a row. So number one, secure access. How do we provide that authentication mechanism, right? And single sign-on, probably very familiar with it today. We all probably use it. Common identity providers are, Ping Identity, Okta. You may even be using Microsoft authentication. But single sign-on can really help to reduce the number of logins and passwords that each user needs to maintain. It's also very easy to change access now based on corporate policy or compliance. Access to all internet and SaaS applications. This includes apps like Google Drive, Salesforce.com, LinkedIn, Workday, all of these productivity applications that we use today. Or it could just be browser-based traffic. Internal and legacy applications are defined as applications managed by your customer's IT team. And these could be homegrown, or they could be applications hosted on-premise. Granular and contextual security policies really help IT to control what users have access to. Now, this is important because ultimately, if you just give employees a browser, they're going to go wherever they want to go. So having a little bit more control over really controlling what business applications that they use is important. A great example here is Microsoft 365. We could be using it for personal uses, or we might have personal accounts, or we might have corporate accounts. So being able to see that is going to be important, and being able to control that access is really key as well. Now, one thing that we can also go a step further is taking that identity information and providing that application access. So products like Citrix Gateway, Azure Active Directory, as I mentioned, and Okta can also control which cloud services that we have access to. So we can actually pull that identity services in. It also opens up use cases around, well, if we're using multi-factor authentication and we're using our phone to authenticate, then what happens if someone steals my phone? How can SASE really help to make sure that the device that's accessing the cloud service is also close to the phone, or recognize that they may be in two different locations? And then if you're a Citrix Secure Workspace Access user, then we go a step further where we can provide some pretty cool capabilities around key logging, screen capturing, disabling printing, cut, copy, restricting browser navigation, or even controlling what files can be downloaded through your browser. So there's an advanced level of control that needs to be thought about, because these are things that we do every day unconsciously, but you as an IT team need to think about, well, how do I prevent my employees printing confidential documents? How do I prevent them downloading documents which they shouldn't be downloading? Or even worst case, uploading them to sites which are not authorized. And then the last one's really around browser isolation. This is a pretty common one too, where you can use a browser on your desktop today, but there's also the capability to run that browser isolated in a remote area, and that's why it's called browser isolation. And if it's run in a remote area, in an isolated virtual environment, then any threats that come in that the user encounters can be isolated to that area. So it's very, very important to see that the benefits of remote browser isolation is very important when you're thinking about, how do I give users access to the web? Because I know they need access, but how do I get a little bit more control over where they're going and make sure that they're not inviting bad actors into my environment, where they could even potentially take over my computer or even any other devices on the network that I might have access to as an employee. And then lastly, URL filtering, very, very common out there, is another easy way to restrict users from going onto sites which may be malicious. Or even if you have a corporate policy around, I don't want my employees going onto gambling sites, for example, gambling throughout the day, then URL filtering can do two things, which is block unwanted URL, block unwanted websites, but also make sure that as websites evolved, we're not going onto unreputable websites. So URL filtering provides a level of reputation scoring that is really built on the latest threat intelligence out there, and can really ensure that your employees are not going to malicious websites and bringing in phishing attacks. Okay, let's talk a little bit about web security. Again, we all browse the internet and it comes very naturally to us. But most importantly, how do we protect from access to the web? And what are the capabilities that we what are the levers that are available from SASE to really do that, right? Now, before we can actually control and protect web access, there's one thing that you need to keep in mind, is that as more and more applications have moved to the web or moved to the cloud, then the data is encrypted. We're all using HTTPS, and all of that data is encrypted. So what you're also going to find is that more and more data on your network is encrypted. So our secure internet access product actually offers SSL decryption, which is included. And very, very important that we're able to decrypt traffic and see inside. So we're ultimately able to see that whether or not there are threats and vulnerabilities hidden in that traffic. So SSL decryption is important. And one advantage of a cloud-based approach to SSL decryption is that on-prem hardware devices, while they can do SSL decryption, they can also be susceptible to man-in-the-middle attacks. And SSL decryption can take a lot of processing power. So if you don't have the horsepower in your on-prem security devices, then SSL decryption can create overhead and impact the user experience. So we want to be able to decrypt for starters, and then we want to be able to start to look and think about, okay, well, again, as I mentioned before, how can we block URLs to malicious website? Can we even block custom URLs? You know, there may be websites that either are internal that we want people to have access to or not have access to. How can we protect from unreputable websites? So part of web security is really being able to have that URL filtering and control. The next piece is around blacklisting operating systems, right? And again, this stems from the bring your own device approach. Again, we've seen as users have gone home to work, they may potentially want to be able to use their own devices to access business applications. But keep in mind that operating systems that we know may have vulnerabilities in them or may be subject to hackers that can take over the system and then exploit access to other corporate assets. And so we want to make sure that we have the capability to blacklist those operating systems if possible, or restrict their access on the corporate environment. And then lastly, web security has to be built on threat intelligence. We commonly hear about zero-day attacks, which is where an attack is new and we don't yet have a way to stop it. And so being able to leverage threat intelligence from multiple sources is going to be key to success in always having the latest threat intelligence to protect your users and devices. All right. The last use case is around securing intellectual property. Often overlooked, but very, very important. While we can be focused on making sure that employees don't go and onto sites where they shouldn't go, you know, threats and vulnerabilities aren't just about making sure that your users can browse the internet securely. It's also about your corporate information. As I mentioned earlier on, it's very easy for documents to be exchanged within the corporate environment, but it's also just as easy for those documents to be sent outside the environment. And they could be, examples could be uploading those documents to third-party file sharing locations that may not be approved. It could also be easy for them documents to be emailed out on a private email address to another third party. So corporate espionage, obviously top of mind these days. So we want to be able to protect intellectual property and sensitive data for both employees inside the corporate network and also remote users who may be using BYO that IT has no control over. Malicious users that typically try to penetrate corporate environments try to get through your traditional security stack in your data center. But now you're using applications hosted in the cloud. They can actually bypass that security stack just like your employees can. So it's very, very important that we think about how do we control that access to business applications in the cloud. And a common way to do that is with a forward proxy, which is a cloud access security broker. And ultimately, the benefit there is you can see that it's in line. It's between that user and device. He has to go through that cloud access security broker, and that can actually see what applications the user is consuming, where they're going, and then it can also control that access, right? You as IT can see where they're going. You can also limit their access. Another advantage is that if they are accessing unsanctioned applications, you can see that access too. So very, very powerful and common deployment is the cloud access security broker, which gives you that visibility into application consumption and also that control. It can also block the uploading of documents to unauthorized locations that may have personally identifiable information. So if we're able to see inside those documents, if they have credit card information, people's addresses, then being able to see inside is important. And again, we are able to control where those documents can go. And for example, if you only want your employees to upload documents to SharePoint or potentially Dropbox, you have that control and you can prevent them from maybe going to Google Drive instead. And then the unsecure movement of content is key here, right? So we want to be also, if that content is downloaded onto unmanaged devices, then being able to detect that and be able to monitor that in real time. Again, we call that data at rest. How can we look at data at rest versus data in motion? By having data leakage prevention in line with our CASB, the two together, we're able to see what documents are flowing back and forth between the user and the cloud, and we can take action on that. So very, very powerful and important that having something like a forward proxy, a cloud access security broker, in line with the data leakage prevention gives you an added layer of protection. And then as you can see, in this particular example, the user is able to go directly to Microsoft 365. So that's an example of intelligent breakout, which is we may not want to send all of our users through a cloud access security broker. In some cases, Microsoft may recommend that you go directly to their cloud or users connect directly to their cloud because they have their own security controls there too. And so by having that direct connection into the cloud and being able to bypass that cloud access security broker is going to be key because we have seen examples where that intelligent breakout is definitely a value add when it comes to providing that flexibility to the workforce. Secure Internet Access is a cloud-delivered security solution that can also provide you with that support managed and unmanaged devices and really provides that protection for users accessing both sanctioned and unsanctioned apps. And when it's combined with our SD-WAN solution, it gives you that intelligent breakout capability right where the user is. So very, very powerful example of integration of networking and security coming together. Okay, so just to close it out, I think one question that may be top of mind is what's the best solution? As I walk through those use cases and examples, you may be thinking, hey, Kieran repeated himself. Those look very similar. But the reality is there is overlap in the technologies, and it will happen because we're seeing a number of technologies converge at the same time. And you may be thinking to yourself, well, if there's overlap, which one do I need to use? Well, there's no right or wrong answer, but the overlap in technologies is not necessarily a bad thing. Ultimately, I think what we see is that a complete solution provides you with the best protection. And ultimately, it provides you with a way to really start your journey to SASE. You may want to build on existing technologies within your organization. You may want to be able to rip and replace that with new technology. It really depends, and you need to make that decision. But just to come back and highlight the benefits of the Citrix approach to SASE. So number one, it is the most comprehensive cloud-delivered security stack in the market, we believe today, right? It has all of those security functions, data leakage prevention, sandboxing, malware protection, firewall as a service, secure web gateway, CASB, all delivered from the cloud. We also have identity-aware zero trust capabilities built into the product as well, so people can authenticate and connect from wherever they want to be. Third is around that best application experience. This is where SD-WAN can kind of really help to make sure that wherever your users are, whether they're remote or they're in the branch, they always have that best user experience. Fourth, being able to reduce that downtime, being able to predict where the best, where problems lie, whether it's the application or the user. And then lastly, it's about that unified management, bringing it all together so you can leverage all of these capabilities together. So that's the end of the presentation today. I hope you enjoyed listening. Please continue to ask the questions, and our experts will answer them. Thank you for listening, and enjoy the rest of the security bootcamp.